How's it going, everybody, and welcome to another episode where I talk about stuff. I apologize for the delay between episodes and general content on my channel, but I was just kind of lazy, and I hope I don't do that again. But this time, I want to talk about the proposed 10-ban change system that is coming to League of Legends, and I'm personally excited about it, and there's been some chatter, and I think a lot of people's first impressions are kind of off in how they see things going. So I want to talk about the meta I expect to develop. But like I said, before I get into that, I want to talk about why I think it's not only super awesome, but why it's kind of needed. And it basically comes down to the fact that the preseason patch this season was honestly just kind of boring. And I can't think of a better way to put it, but there's just been no major system overhauls. Most preseasons, there's something crazy that redefines the way the game works every single time. And we had the jungle change, sure, but they also took away the smite buffs, and the plants aren't super dynamic in how much they impact the game. Honestly, what's more important is the jungle respawn timers and some of those tweaks. But it wasn't like they changed how the jungle functions. It just kind of changed that meta. Same with the mastery of the Colossus, strength of the Colossus or whatever. And overall, there just wasn't a giant system overhaul anywhere. No changes to turrets, dragons, items really didn't get super reworked, no mastery changes, nothing crazy that we're used to seeing in the preseason. I mean, assassins really got reworked hard, but if they're not in that game, then that game feels the same as the last season. So in this sense, when I've watched some collegiate games, which is really the only competitive on right now on this patch, it's honestly doesn't look that different from last year. And that's a little scary. I'm not sure it's needed to always look different, but I'm just used to it. But I think the 10 ban system would be exactly what is needed to spice things up heading into Season 7. So obviously there's a lot of ramifications across the board as well between solo queue and competitive, not just in how it drafts, but how pro teams have to address practice. And it has these really sweeping, broad impact that isn't just so easily understood as, oh, well, there's a couple more bans and things like that. So I'll pull up what was kind of leaked. It's a graphic about what the proposed system will actually look like. And before I really get into what I think is going to happen, I just want to address this one fear, I guess, complaint that I keep seeing spouted. And it's the idea that somehow bad players are going to keep getting forced onto their sixth best champion, and we're just going to be watching really low quality League of Legends. Maybe. I really doubt it, because a team would have to be so bad in the pick ban phase to just not see this coming at all. You have 3 bans targeted in the first half, where it's at this one role, and then the team has 3 chances to draft something in that role, and then the other team bans 2 more times, and then they would have to be first pick to take it away, or you just have to be really dumb if you were on that side and you didn't take it. So the idea that you're just going to get forced onto your third best or your 6th best champion is crazy. And like, it's never like we saw people often force on their 4th best champion. That was like once with Santorin, and that was like actually a viable strategy because there were 4 really top tier junglers, and they banned 3 and took 1. So that was more meta dependent really than anything. And you're just going to give up so much stuff in the draft if you like ban super heavily this way. There's going to be a ton of OPs up and things like that. And it just, I don't think it'll ever happen this way. And even if a team wants to take this strategy, the other team should be smart enough to see it coming and start counteracting it somehow. And if they can't, well, then they're just terrible anyways. And I don't think the problem is, oh my God, this guy's on a 6th best champion. It should be, oh my God, this team has no fucking clue how to draft. But that's the kind of one that I think people are just really overstating. There's a couple other things that people are talking about. Some of them are scared about the possibility of blue side having the first and last pick. And I personally don't think it's that much of an issue, because I think what is possibly going to be the strongest pick in the draft in terms of the position will actually be the last pick of the first rotation. So basically, there's 4 power points in the draft now in that kind of sense, where there's the first pick, first rotation, last pick, first rotation, first pick, second rotation, last pick, second rotation. And if I had to rank those, I would say maybe first pick, first rotation is still the most powerful, but then last pick, second rotation, super strong, and I'll get into that in a second. And then the other 2, probably first pick of second rotation is better than counter pick. And my thinking on this is because we've never had in League of Legends a chance for someone to pick a character and then ban to defend it. So what I expect to see happen a lot of the time in that last spot in the first rotation is to someone pick either something really OP with only like a couple matchups that deal with it and then ban those, or pick something that's kind of needs some scaling and has some weak matchups, and then boom, ban the worst matchups and make it through on something else. You could also see something where you pick just the strongest potential laner and ban out a couple other things. So like just using the last meta as an example, maybe somehow Poppy Jace go through and no one's taken them, and then on the last pick on red side, you would take the Jace, ban the Poppy, and then you just have really, really great matchups in almost every other situation. And same thing I think can happen with Gnar. Gnar was kind of weak to Kennen and Rumble. Maybe you ban, you pick the Gnar, you ban those two, and then what's the worst thing? Aurelia, like a Jarvan. Those are both things that you can easily deal with. So I think that pick will be super, super important in the draft, and I expect that to become really how the second ban phase meta develops, is really around what was taken there and then what each team kind of has to deal with from that. I expect the first ban phase to play out pretty similar to what happened right now. League of Legends always has a couple champions that are just slightly overtuned. Never usually not game-breakingly broken, and you see those kind of banned. You can expect to see red side still banning out like the Nidalee or whatever that equivalent is in the next season, those type of really powerful picks, and blue side doing some more targeted stuff. And I expect the first pick on the first rotation, then the next two, and then the next two to play out mostly the same, where you're taking a lot of just generally strong stuff that doesn't have many losing matchups, that's safe blind, as well as junglers and those kinds of things I think will be the same. But then once you hit that last pick of the first rotation, you'll start seeing some crazy, weird stuff happen. And I think you'll also see a lot more of a lopsided map, because a lot of things right now are taken because they're super safe when they're blind and you just need to pick it. Now you can pick something that's strong, and then but maybe has a couple weaknesses, and then you can ban out things that would exploit those weaknesses. So I'm personally really excited to see it. I'm also really excited because it'll just force more things into the meta, because more stuff will get banned. You'll see more pocket picks maybe, and that's kind of how I expect the draft to start turning out. Pretty similar for the first half of it, and then the second half gets really different, where it's a lot more counter pick heavy and banning to protect things or really exploit other things. So super cool. I think it's also interesting in what it makes important for a player, because right now most people are only playing like 5 matchups at a time really, and they just learn those at a super, super high level, and it almost gets formulaic at a point where you can ask a player, how do you play this matchup? And they'll say, well, on the first wave I push with these abilities and I do that, and then I back on the third wave and pick up my second Doran's ring and I come back with a ward and I place it here, and they can map out their entire early game plan. And of course jungler messes with it and maybe they mistrade a little bit and mistakes happen, but in theory they have almost this entire matchup understood. And I think what you'll see with this potential, where someone gets targeted a little heavier or you just ban out the most common counter picks, is that adaptability and almost like game intuition will become much more highly valued than your ability to execute on a game plan, because there's just going to be so many more matchups that you can't practice for. And I think you might see bloodier games from that. Maybe some people don't like that. They think it's sloppier. Personally, I don't mind. I was never one of those people who wanted to see this really clean, bloodless, macro-focused game. I appreciated those as well, but I also really liked when people just were like, kill, 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 kill. I loved the kind of bloodbaths, and I think you'll see that trend a little bit more that way as they are forced into less understood matchups. And then my only real concern with this is the fact that the way champions work in League of Legends compared to Dota, which is the thing people often cite with this ban system. And in Dota, a lot of champions, and I'm not a huge Dota fan, so correct me if I'm wrong here, but my understanding is that a lot of the champions are very, very different in how they function. And you would ban out certain things that would ruin this strategy, and now you've unlocked the potential to pick this weird thing that's gonna go off. And in League of Legends, the champions aren't really like that. They all kind of fall into like kind of well understood categories. And the way that we pick and ban in the pro scene coming from it is that you just take the best of the best at that category. So for a while, if you wanted a control mage, dude, just pick Azir. Or you can pick Orianna, she's always good. And then there's a couple of that cycle out there like Ryze, these kind of like different things. And the meta is just about those top tier picks. And my concern would be if you end up something in the first rotation that's super strong, and then you're not seeing, new interesting gameplay, you're just seeing a worse version of that. So someone gets his ear and someone else is forced onto something that's just not that great. I think that kind of gameplay wouldn't be, I wouldn't say it's bad, but it wouldn't be as interesting as what I'm hoping for, which is where we see just more interesting counterpick and more diversity versus just seeing like, well, it's the same kind of champion that we've seen before, but now we're just watching a weaker version of it. And that's my biggest concern, because most of the time people don't draft in a way where they're making some crazy comp that has this like one synergy that's absolutely insane. Usually it's like a very solid comp that can do a little bit of everything, you know, wave clear, push, TP, engage, counter engage. Most often comps are pretty well rounded, and banning out more things just means you're left with champions who do that stuff worse in that role. So that would be the worst case scenario, but even then, you know, that's not that bad. At least we'll be seeing more champions and more draft strategies, so that portion of the game becomes a lot more interesting. Having, you know, a lot of people will point to coaches, I think, but a lot of times it's on players to give the coaches the information to make good decisions. So just teams working as a whole in the pick ban phase system will be a lot more important. It'll hopefully influence a lot more games. And I hope people understand that it's not just this coach sucks or whatever, because sometimes it kind of gets into that realm, or this player can't play those champions or blah, blah, blah. I think it'll just be a more complex environment, even if it doesn't have the crazy impact that I think a lot of people are hoping it will. Overall, I'd say it's a super positive change. I'm really excited for it. I don't think there's too much of a concern, other than maybe how do you translate it to solo queue and keep the draft time the same so you don't end up in these super long lobbies and things like that. But coming from the competitive scene, I don't really give a shit about that. So anyways, I think it's a super positive change overall, and I can't wait to see what it does in Season 7. It's a little ways off from starting again, so why don't you subscribe here to pass the time until the season actually gets underway again. Thanks.